This is Hidden Killers Live with Tony Bruschi, Stacey Cole, and Todd Michaels.
7 months of living together. 8 years of alleged obsession. Michael McKee is charged with murdering his ex-wife Monique Tepe and her husband Spencer, allegedly 8 years after she escaped what family members describe as emotional abuse and death threats. There's no indication he ever remarried. We have recently heard from an ex-girlfriend now who described him as boring. Prosecutors say he drove 6 hours, entered without forced entry, killed them both at 3:52 a.m. while their kids slept, and then got back in the car and drove back. What happens inside a mind that allegedly can't let go? Psychotherapist Shavaun Scott is with us to help break all of this down. She's the author of The Minds of Mass Killers and her most recent Nightbird, her autobiography, available wherever books are sold. Today we're going to go into the psychology of the obsessive ex. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the victim experience. What happened with Monique and her life during and after the relationship, and also what the family is now dealing with in the aftermath of this tragedy. Let's start out with the 2-year marriage. On paper, the 7-month marriage, the 2-year relationship, 7 months actually living together, and allegedly 8 years of fixation and ended in double homicide. Shavaun, what does that math tell you about what allegedly happened inside this man's head? Very short time of the commitment together of marriage, about 2 years of relationship in total, but 8 years of silence and then striking.
Yeah. The first thing that came to mind, and as we always say, we can't diagnose him, but it fits the personality profile of someone that I like the term the dark tetrad. And this is a person with very scary personality qualities. The first, of course, is the psychopath who has no actual conscience, who uses people, who's cold and callous and capable of doing horrible things with no remorse. Then you've got the traits of a narcissist. It's all about me, 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 me. You exist to meet my needs. And they can be very jealous, very competitive, and they don't let go of things. They feel like I'm entitled to you when they're married to someone, and how dare you leave me. The next trait is Machiavellianism, and this is a person who's sneaky. They plan, they think ahead, they often plan years in advance, and they can fool a lot of people because they wear a very effective mask. And then the final quality is sadism. This is a person who can do very, very cruel things and violence, and they take pleasure in that. It makes them feel good. They get a mood boost from causing harm to other people. So when I heard about this guy, those are the qualities that came into my mind.
What molds somebody to be part of the dark tetrad? I mean, it sounds like, would you like to be part of the dark tetrad? Click now. And then, you go to some sort of website and you put your information in, and suddenly you're part of the club. But what exactly molds someone's brain to think that this is a good way to function? Or is this just kind of how their brain came out?
Yeah, this is hardcore personality pathology, and we're all a mix of genetics, environment, and who knows what family dynamics. Was there a parent like this in his life? That's one of my guesses. So he probably came in with some faulty wiring. We know that the psychopath has a very different brain. They have a smaller amygdala. They don't feel fear the way most of us do. And interestingly, surgeons, if you do psychological testing on surgeons score in subclinical psychopath areas a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that they all meet the full criteria for psychopaths. I don't want to freak anybody out about their surgeon.
But look at what they're doing for a living.
Look at what they're doing. They're cutting people open. They're doing it in a very calm state of mind. And that is similar to the way a psychopath can commit horrible crimes, and they don't have anxiety about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a combination of genetics and very likely some kind of environmental influences that aren't well understood.
It's like you could take two paths in life if you have these sort of traits. One, you can use those skills, if you want to call them that, for good, or you can go down a completely other dark path, and it can be completely and utterly destructive. But it's scary nonetheless what people are capable of with this way of thinking. Family members say Monique described death threats during those 7 months. It wasn't after she left. It was while they were still together. What does that reveal when someone starts threatening death before the relationship ends? I mean, it's insane to really do that to anybody at any point in time for the most part. But in a relationship with someone that you love, I mean, it's just like something most of us would never even conceive of doing.
Mm-hmm.
But it to be like kind of, well, that's a lever I'm going to pull. If you do this to me, I'm going to say this to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's one hell of a disconnect.
Mm-hmm. And it's not love. It's definitely not love. It's a very strong form of attachment, but it's all about dominance and control. And she was obviously a high-functioning, intelligent woman, and she probably did not serve him in the way that he thought he was supposed to be served. He probably had jealousy issues, and he sounds very quick to amp it up and go to death threats. And kudos to her for recognizing it and getting out of it as quickly as she did. But obviously, 8 years later, we still had a tragedy.
I've got a question, and I don't want this to sound as though I'm victim shaming. I'm asking for, as a woman, how do we not get into relationships like this? And this isn't going to turn it to take a conversation off air. This isn't going to turn into Delilah here, I promise.
You collect cats and stay in your apartment and never leave.
Stop.
Yeah.
Stop. But how do you see this coming? I mean, can you see this coming? And how do you prevent this from happening in your world? She acted within 7 months saying, holy shit, I got to get out of this. But she was in this relationship. Were there red flags?
There may have been, but what's really terrifying about this, and this hits that Machiavellian piece, these kind of people are very deceptive. They're masters of deception and charm. And so when you put all this together, he may have been very effective at romancing her and creating this very false sense of self that was hidden from her. And that would be my guess. Now, with hindsight, she could probably look back and see some of the red flags, but sometimes it really flies under a person's radar. And I can say I've been there too, with not seeing things, that looking back, it's like, how could I not see that? But that's kind of the norm, I think, for people who get into a domestic violence situation or a scary situation.
At the core, if someone were to, let's say the person's going to answer a question honestly and have any sort of introspective skills, if you were just to ask a person, are you happy? Someone like this, are you happy in your life? Are you fulfilled? Are these people happy? Are these people fulfilled in their lives with the way that they interact with the world, or are they just as frustrated? And this is the only modality that they know. And that's why they don't change. That's why they keep, they end up hitting walls everywhere they go, and it just keeps adding to those wounds, which ends up making them the wound collector type.
Yeah. And it's a person who keeps score. And so they are, I think, chronically unhappy and dissatisfied, but it's never their fault. They never look internally, like, what am I doing here, that may be contributing to this. So a person like this, my favorite term, we've all got our favorite terms. Mine is injustice collector. It's like they've always got a scale on what's fair, and they're entitled to more than other people. And so they misinterpret benign slights as some kind of strike against them, and they keep an enemies list, but it may not be something that they talk about, but they think about it over and over. And so if they're savvy, maybe in the early parts of a relationship, they don't share that aloud, or they share just a little bit, about I've been treated unfairly. But this guy was obviously really high functioning, and he compartmentalized and was able to play the game to achieve a lot.
One of his ex-girlfriends recently, it was discovered that she had posted on social media. She's since pulled it down, but she, if it's true, she was making comments about the relationship that she was in with him for about a year. This was after Monique, and she ended it. Basically, said he was boring, kind of shocked by all this, but that he was very surface level. Basically, that she had a really hard time going deep with him on anything, and that's why she ended it, because she just felt like on the surface he seemed nice, he seemed friendly, but could never really dig in to get a better idea on who he really was. Is that because people like this don't know who they really are deeper down, and they're constantly searching for that, and that emptiness is part of the motor that drives their unhappiness, or do they truly know who they are, and they know how dark it is, and that they're shielding it from the outside world?
Yeah, the second is my guess, is that he knew who he was. He saw himself as righteous, but he also was savvy enough to hide that from people and compartmentalize really well. As we talk about serial killers, who people every now and then meet one and they think, well, he was a heck of a nice guy, or a normal guy, or the deacon in the church, but he just doesn't show that deeper process going on.
Is it possible he wasn't invested in that relationship because he was so focused on Monique? This relationship looked good on the surface. It looked normal. Yeah. But he wasn't invested.
100%. That's exactly where my mind went to. You nailed it, is that he just wasn't really attached to that one.
Which is interesting, because you'd almost think that any slight with these types of folks, the dark tetrad, would be, another one to collect, another one to try and cash in on with others. Here's another person that victimized me. I'm gonna take this one to the bank as long as I can. But that's not always the case. It seems to be somewhat selective as to who they choose to be offended by.
Yeah. And he really had his hooks in Monique. He really, obviously, 8 years later, which is rare for it to go on that long. These kind of cases are sadly not rare, but usually it's fairly soon after the separation or divorce.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point in this one, and I don't know if that's what's there's a high level of interest in this case compared to other ones. Every once in a while we get a case that it strikes a nerve for whatever reason. It's speaking to more people than others, and this is one of them. And I'm wondering how much of that is striking the nerve is because it was an 8-year span here, and probably a lot of us, I would probably say myself included, where you're like, oh God, like 8 years is a long time. It's like, could that crazy person from my past still be holding this grudge that's going to, they're going to somehow strike someday? Because a lot of us think, well, after a little bit of time, time heals all wounds, quote unquote. And for a lot of people it has, but it's not uncommon for this type of behavior, unfortunately. But how uncommon is it for it to be 8 years out?
8 years is a long time, and that's what surprised me with the case. Usually they can't contain their rage that long. But again, this is a guy with all his professional achievements. He was obviously goal-directed. He was probably obsessive in other areas of his life, which is why he was such a high achiever. And he probably got a great deal of pleasure over planning for this 8 years what he was going to eventually do. And at some point, we don't know why then, that would be a question clinically, why at that point, what set off, this is what I'm going to do it. Anniversary dates, court cases, these are all times of increased risk. So there was something else that we don't know about that finally he decided this is the time to do it. But yeah, 8 years is a long time. And it's also terrifying for people who've been out of a relationship like this for a couple of years, and they've been breathing a sigh of relief thinking, okay, we're past it now. And clearly this is aberrant.
Do you think there ever was a time when he maybe was trying to move on, or do you think this was the ultimate goal, was that I'm going to get that bitch?
It would just be my guess that this was a consistent fantasy. I've seen men similar to this. They maybe didn't end up murdering, but they stayed fixated. They kept her picture by their bed for years and had this dual sense of she's mine, she's supposed to be mine, but it's all about control and angry fantasies. And, so it would be my guess that he never really let go of it.
Do you think it's something that he thought he would ever act on, or there's a lot of people that will have, their dark fantasies and, revenge fantasy. I mean, and I think all of us to certain extents, if someone has wronged us, you get like for a moment, like, oh, the revenge fan. Then it's like, okay, well, that's done, and you move on. It's just, it's the human mind working its way through shit. But when someone sits there and ruminates on it and actually then starts to think, oh, maybe I'm going to plan this out and actually execute it. Do you think it initially was just kind of those sort of fantasies, and then something triggered this where he decided, I'm actually going to act on this? I mean, we do have because what was looked at for a while is, why was there action on the divorce in the court system? We've learned now that was allegedly just a clerical error. Somebody ticked a box basically, and then when somebody goes to the divorce filings, and basically when you search for a file in a computer and when was this last accessed, date modified, even if nothing was modified, if you just looked at it, sometimes it says that. That's essentially what happened. So that pops up. That could have sent out an alert. They had just celebrated, I think it was like their 5th wedding anniversary. There was a lot of things going on. He's dealing with the civil lawsuits. His license is lapsing. A lot of things are falling apart over on his world. It kind of makes you wonder of like, was this well, screw it. All this is falling apart over here. She wronged me. And then he just kind of leaned into the fantasy of revenge. And I'm wondering if this was even going to be the last of what he wanted to carry out.
It's a really good guess, because all those other stressors in his life could have tipped the scales toward action. This is very similar to the guys who do mass shootings. The stages are the grievance, and then that moves into, now the grievance may be, I don't like the Jews, or I don't like Hispanic people, or whatever. They have these distorted grievances, and then they start fantasizing about it, and they can fantasize for years about what they want to do. I've seen some that have fantasized for 10 years before doing the shooting. But it's when they move into the planning phase where it's, okay, I'm going to get the gun, or this is exactly how I'm going to sneak in. And the planning phase usually doesn't last very long before they move into the attack.
Do they convince themselves that they're going to get away with it? Because I would imagine in the early fantasy stages, they're like, well, this wouldn't end well. Like, I'd be going down no matter. And then that kind of stops anybody from going further. But do they convince themselves that they're going to get away with it? Or do they just not care at some point where it's like, I don't care if I go down. They had it coming, and I'm doing the righteous thing basically in their mind.
Yeah, I think it could be some of both. Some probably do think they're going to get away with it, those that try to cover their tracks. But a lot of them suicide at the scene. They commit the murders, then they shoot themselves. Super common. But it could have been, what do I have to lose at this point? So let me just go ahead and do it and see what happens.
That's interesting to me that they suicide at the scene in some of these, and we know that they do. But when you have that narcissistic type personality, that psychopath, I mean, those are not folks that ever seem to really have any sort of introspection on themselves, or have a great deal of shame, at least that is displayed publicly. And it feels like those are the folks that tend to not end it themselves, where it's like, why didn't you just end it yourself before you did all of this?
Right.
But a lot of them don't. Is that a deviation in some cases where they do end it themselves?
Yeah, I don't know if we can explain that one really well.
Yeah.
I think sometimes they've been this duality of I want to direct my anger outward at my wife or my ex-wife. Sometimes they kill the kids, and then
Yeah.
it's just like, fuck it, my life's over, and
Yeah.
I know I'm going to go down for this, and then they turn that rage. Suicide is often all about rage. We think it's
Yeah.
about depression, but sometimes it's about rage, and that rage just propels them to turn the gun on themselves too.
I
And
have a
obviously,
question. Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. I was going to say, obviously, he's innocent until proven guilty. This is all speculation. Go ahead, Stacey.
My curiosity is if he really wanted the ultimate revenge on Monique, and this is really morbid, but wouldn't he have kept her alive while decimating her family? I mean, wouldn't he have let her live?
That is something that happens a lot. There was that awful case where there were problems in a marriage like this, and there were 3 little boys. This happened a couple years ago. I don't remember in what state, but the guy took the gun, and as the children were running and screaming from him, their father shot each of the 3 kids in front of the mother.
I remember
Did
that.
not shoot the mother. So it's really, different branches of the same tree, I think. Why do some of them go in one way and some of them go in the other? Why did the fantasy take the form it did? But yeah, you see a lot of crazy variations with it.
A lot of people are wondering, why did he keep the gun? Because, allegedly they found the gun, or at least the Nibbin check so far. Preliminarily, as of right now, it looks like he still had the gun in his possession. And people are like, why would you keep the murder weapon? I don't know that he was done. That's kind of where I'm at on it. I mean, this is just pure speculation, and I think his digital footprint's going to be really interesting, especially if we find any sort of planning documentation or anything like that about Monique. I'm wondering if we're going to find more about other folks, considering there was the pending lawsuits that he went off the grid for and did not be served by. I'm wondering if those folks were also on a list of this man, because they seem to be also people that he had grievances with.
Yeah, that happens too, where sometimes you get somebody that actually goes on a spree and they take out everybody on the grievance list, or at least their top 10 targets. Yeah, I had a case like that in my town in California where a guy, but it was all done within a few day period. But he took out his child's preschool teacher because he didn't like some kind of interaction with the preschool teacher. He took out a lawyer. He took out a wife. I mean, he just went from person to person to person. It was horrifying.
Yeah, I mean, it's I really feel that way in this case. I mean, that's just my conjecture, but anybody who's still alive who may have known that there was a grievance with this man might want to consider themselves lucky, because I think he might have been getting ready to go on tour.
Yeah.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Bruschi and the Hidden Killers podcast.